Perfect. Good morning. You are at a Forever Forward, which is the name of a program we present monthly at Entrepreneurs Forever. I try to find a topic that I know that our entrepreneurs are struggling with. And this month, I know that you're going to get a ton of value out of the Forever Forward we're going to have with our guest presenter, Greg Russak, about great sales conversations. We actually played with what to call it, consultative sales conversations, closing conversations. If you have been in a conversation with a sales prospect and wondered, am I doing this right today? You will make sure that you are doing it as best you can. So we're going to get started with our introductions. We'll do the presentation. We'll do a little bit of sharing. And I'm not sure if we'll get to the breakouts. We have met those of you who are on here. But I'll just mention for the recording, Entrepreneurs Forever's mission is to empower all small business owners to grow thriving businesses that sustain their families and support their communities. We do that mostly through our peer meetings, peer support group meetings. And we also run these programs. If you are not already a member and you want to learn more, you can come to one of our business boosts. I always like to mention upcoming sessions because I think that if I wait to the end, I forget them. So we have a deep dive later this month. Can I afford to retire? Many of us who are small business owners do not get thoughtful about that until we get way too close to retiring, or am I going to have to work until I can't anymore? So that one is on Monday, August 19th. And next month's Forever Forward is about telling your story, which is well beyond what we do with an elevator pitch. So both of those hopefully will be of interest to you. Note that this presentation does not take the place of professional advice from your own paid advisors. There are lots of people who will give you sales coaching, and we're trying to sort of hit the tip of the iceberg, but hire your own sales coach if you need one to do sales training. So again, today's presentation is with Greg, who's from Conscientious Capitalist. I have always challenged when I try to spell conscientious. And he is all about having great sales conversations, and that's why we picked that topic for him today. We have a worksheet, and I'll share it with you in just a moment. But I'm going to let Greg do his own intros and share his deck from his computer, and I'll drop the worksheet in the chat for you. So Greg, you are up. If you want to do your intro before you start sharing, however you'd like to.
Sure. Thanks, Deborah. Yeah, it's great to meet you both, Cindy. James, you look familiar, like we've met before somewhere. You said you're in Pittsburgh?
Yeah, you in Pittsburgh?
Yeah.
Where at? North, south, east, west?
East.
I don't know you then. The border guards don't allow me over there. I'm out by the airport.
Oh, yeah, for sure. You're on the other side of the world for us people on the east side.
It's easier to get to San Francisco than it is the east side of Pittsburgh for me.
Sorry, that's not much of an introduction. So thanks again for joining us both. I'm really happy to be here. Deborah and I have started to forge a nice relationship, I think, and I'm looking forward to being more helpful to her and to the rest of the group. Conscientious Capitalist is a business that I founded, and I am a solopreneur. I don't shy away from that idea. After 35 years in strategic B2B selling, I discovered that I get a lot more reward and satisfaction out of sharing what I've learned than working for somebody else. And that's why I decided to start my own practice. Since about 2008 is when I really started to go on my own. What I've discovered along the way, and I knew part of this going in, is that if we're going to create a thriving business, it's going to be meaningful to our customers. There's a couple of things we need to do. And I'm going to be talking about a lot of that here this morning. What I tend to provide services to are to the startup and emerging companies that have found a way to get some sales traction, but they're struggling to figure out how to make it scalable and maybe even more importantly, predictable. And that's what a sales strategy and a sales process really is all about, is making sales more predictable by making it a process. Now, there are a lot of different schools of thought out there about how to do sales. Consultative selling is actually one of them. In my experience, there's something to be gained and used productively from almost any of these sales training methodologies. Consultative selling, and this is where I guess I'm going to start sharing my screen.
You know what, Greg, why don't you get your screen up? And James and Cindy, if you don't mind just sharing what your business is, since you're kind of getting a personal coaching session.
That's a
I
good
think
point.
if Greg knows more about your business, maybe we can make this a really targeted session for you. So James, you're unmuted. You want to go first?
I have several businesses that right now I'm looking to start up an investment business into new startups or second rounds. You know, I think with the advent of AI, there's a lot of mousetraps which can be improved out there. I also have a staffing and recruiting business. So we deal nationwide, a lot of IT, laboratory. If you need someone to wash your car, we can find them.
And that's mainly the core business is the staffing business, correct?
Of that business, yes.
And a sales conversation for you in that context would be to an employer who's going to use you to staff a position or a department or something, correct?
You know, this is actually coming at a perfect time because I'm to the point now where I'm just gonna, I feel like I just need to ask, would you buy from me? Plain and simple. You know, because I've been dancing with people for years, you know, and no one's reached out or anything. So now, you know, I find this industry, it's all about who you know and trust. If you don't know that person, very hard to get in.
You're describing a lot of the key words actually that, and one of the outcomes that I really intend for everyone to get from this session is how to get to the order, how to get to the ask, how to get the customer to say yes. And not because you're trying to talk them into anything, because it's the natural outcome of that consultative sales process.
And I also kind of have two clients, right? Because now I got to attract candidates to go work for clients too. So they're almost a client. So you're serving two masters, and you know, it's easier said than done.
All right, Cindy, would you like to introduce yourself and tell us what a sales conversation for you is about?
I would. So Cindy Berselli, and I do artwork. I'm focusing on animals mostly, so really I'm promoting animal portraits. And it is interesting because most people come to me, and I've found that it takes usually 3 years from the initial contact until they really get a painting going. And I'm not sure why there's that lag time, but it seems to be that way. And I wouldn't mind speeding that up a little bit, but also I just want to be more comfortable with when I'm talking to them because I am often very hesitant, especially around pricing. I don't know why. I need to get over that and get that squared away, and I know that for years now. So that's one thing I really need to firm up, and this year's the year I've set the deadline to do that. But I think yeah, just how to really encourage people to go ahead with that, and the best way to carry on those conversations. So I'm really excited. I'm really glad you're taping this because obviously I'm going to be kind of otherwise engaged here. But yeah, this is going to be, I think, very helpful for me. And I also just got that first licensing deal, which I'm really excited about, and so far so good. But that's one reason I'm doing these. So so working on that.
And Greg, I would say for the value of our recording and the people who might watch later, Entrepreneurs Forever has a lot of business members who provide services. They're consultants, they're coaches, they're marketing agencies, they're graphic designers, they're bookkeepers, organizers, admin type people. And I think that it's not a transactional sale like click to buy or somebody walking into a shop and just, you know, putting something in a shopping cart. It's much more of a dialogue and a conversation. And that's why we came up with this topic. So maybe that will help you as we move forward as well.
Yeah, that's very helpful, Deborah. And Cindy, James, thank you so much for giving me a sense as to what you are working on, what struggles you're having, and what kind of outcomes you hope to get from today's session. I think what you should find out by the time we get to the end is that, as Deborah just pointed out, these kinds of conversations, especially around consultative selling and the way to approach that tends to be in what I would consider to be high ticket, high value kinds of transactions, not the shopping cart type of transaction where you're not really having much of a discussion or doing much of a needs analysis or anything like that with a customer. And so it seems like you two are perfectly suited for the kinds of things that we'll be talking about this morning. And as far as that goes, at any point, jump in, stop me, ask questions. That's no problem at all. I want this to be as interactive as you want it to be. And especially with a small group, we should be able to do that, I think, pretty easily. So kicking things off, in terms of what consultative selling really is all about, of course, is to generate revenues, right? And to do that in a way that not just captures the business from your prospect, but potentially even more importantly, creates a long-term relationship that's built around trust. And that's how your business not only has that win in terms of the revenue, but has a foundation on which they can build. When I think about consultative selling, I think about mindset first and foremost. And there's a worksheet that I think we're going to put in the chat.
They
if it's
should
not
have
there,
it. I attached it already.
Thank you. So this worksheet is designed to align essentially with the deck here, but it's also intended to help get you thinking about some of the bigger questions that go sort of in depth behind what these bullet points are all about. And so as we talk about what it means to be a consultative seller or to have that sort of mindset, there are some key concepts, as you can see here on the slide. First and foremost is the idea of being very customer-centric. In your mind and in your heart, you want to be helpful to people. That's where really consultative selling starts, is that it isn't about you, it isn't about your business, it's about them. And if you do that and can do that in a very genuine way, you're going to be much more successful at now keeping the conversation aligned to the things that they said are important to them. And that's where it really, in terms of being collaborative, is extremely helpful. What does collaborative mean in terms of selling? As you can see here, when's the last time you enjoyed having a salesperson push something on you? When was the last time you experienced a sales interaction in which they didn't seem to care about what you wanted all that much? It was only about what they were trying to pitch to you as their product. That's not a great way to start a relationship or to be collaborative. You need to be making sure if you're and maybe James, you have a demo. Do you have a demo built into your business model at all in your go-to-market? Yeah, is there anything that you show to people? Is there a demonstration that you're showing to anyone?
No, what I do have are like the 3 bins that I recruit for: small businesses, 1 to 5 requests a year, hard to find requirements, and then multi-city, multinational, or multi throughout the US, big corporations. So I service all 3. So I give an example. I don't know exactly how I can demo. Real quick, are we getting these slides afterward?
Of course.
Yes.
Okay.
But the reason I asked that, and the only reason I asked, and maybe for those who will see this later, I make this point explicitly because it's really tempting when you have especially a software solution of some kind, is to first and foremost want to jump to doing demos. They're inviting people to do demos. Well, my advice is if you're doing that without understanding what your your prospects' actual goals and challenges are, that demonstration, a canned one size fits all. If somebody agrees to watching that, there's a good chance they're not very high in the power-oriented decision-making process. People who have too little time in their day and who have to make business decisions aren't going to watch a demo of something that isn't specific to them and their needs. And that's the only reason I brought that up. Being consultative in my mind also means you're working to earn that trust right from the very beginning, right from your first outreach. And one of the pieces of advice I give salespeople, sales managers, my clients is once you've identified who your best prospects are, and the worksheet has some questions for you to answer around this, your job really is to set yourself apart. And to do that gets harder and harder all the time. especially if you're only thinking about things like email, maybe even text. My advice is think about who your customer is. Start sharing information with them that doesn't cost you anything and doesn't cost them anything, and doesn't include an ask. And this is the whole I saw this today and thought of you approach. I use this all the time. I read news in the morning. I see something and I think Deborah might like it. I'm going to send it to her. I'm not going to ask for anything in return. I'm simply trying to establish trust and let her know that I'm paying attention to presumably some of the same things that she is. I think that's a great way to then create some awareness, because given CRM and email systems, you know when somebody's opening an email. You'll know if they click a link. Those are signals that can then help to establish who's the most engaged out of the group of prospects that you're trying to reach. And then finally, again, relationship building to me is everything. Whether you call it consultative selling, whether you call it Miller Hyman, Dale Carnegie, it really doesn't matter. In my mind, especially in the 21st century, when I think decision makers are even under greater stress, their time is even less available. If you're someone that earns a place amongst their trusted advisors, that's a significant accomplishment. And the way to make that happen really is to have that attitude and that mindset that you're here to help, and you have a degree of expertise that can be helpful to them. You're proving that along the way. And when you do get to the point of where you're doing collaborative work, you can use things like a project plan. I'm going to show it to you here very quickly to help keep things moving. Is everybody seeing that Google spreadsheet?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So this is one of the resources you will have access to. It's part of the tools and templates I've built for myself and for my practice over the years. And really what it amounts to is a way to provide documentation to your prospect as you work with them around how this whole exploration, discovery, and decision-making is going to happen, who's going to be involved, when it's going to happen, and check it off along the way. This seems like it's a very simple way to approach things, but I don't see it get used nearly enough. And I think it's because people are hesitant to say to their prospect, hey, I'm going to put this checklist together so you and I stay on track. You know what that does for both of us? It keeps me from being that person in your voicemail and email that says, hey, just checking in. Are we going to have that next meeting? When do we get together again? You know what else it does? It qualifies whether or not you're talking to somebody who's truly interested. Because if somebody isn't really ready to agree to following some kind of a punch list, that's really what this is, then I'm going to suggest to you they're not serious enough yet. And you still have work to do. If you think they're a good prospect, you need to figure out how to earn their trust enough so that they'll agree to a project plan that you'll manage. And again, the goal and the way I've always positioned this is it's so that you and I both know when we're going to get together next and who else is going to be involved. If it has to change, it changes. That's okay. That's not, that happens, right? But this is one of the tools that's available to you on my website as part of the free sales resources.
You know what I love about this? We actually ran a session a month or two ago about CRMs. And that all you're doing is using a Google Sheet to do some tracking of what's going on. So a CRM could be as simple as that could be a piece of paper, but it could be that kind of a worksheet. You don't have to have fancy software to track the progress of a conversation and a sale to a client.
Exactly right, Deborah. And what an external device like this does for you, and you can figure out all kinds of different ways to do this, but this gives you something to send to your prospect that has basically is the record of what's going to happen and who's going to be involved and when it's going to happen. And when it gets changed, you send new versions of it to them. And again, there's lots of ways you could do this. What this really is meant to do is to make sure that you are staying on track and you aren't wasting your time. So when it comes to how, what does it really mean? Was there a question?
No, sorry.
Okay. So how do we find out what the prospect really needs? What are some ways that we can do this? Well, here are three of them that I think work extremely well. Playbooks, listening, and summarizing. So both of my children are adults, grown adults. They're in the musical theater business. I learned from them decades ago how to really tell a story. And what sometimes business people forget is that that's part of what we're doing. We're storytelling, because people will remember stories a lot more than they will facts and figures. So if a salesperson is going to do a good job of qualifying prospects, understanding their needs, developing a project plan for the evaluation your prospect will go through and getting to a decision, a sales playbook can help to systematize that, to turn it into a process. It doesn't mean every call goes the same way. And it doesn't mean it's a script that people read. In fact, when I coach young salespeople, I give them a script and tell them to read it. It's okay. It's okay until you know the story you're telling.
So,
right?
so Greg, maybe we can get really granular here. It's a small group,
Sure.
and Cindy specifically said it's taken her 3 years to close somebody. How do
Yes.
you create a playbook that turns that into a 2 or 3 phone call close instead of a 3 years waiting for them to get back to you?
So I don't know that there's always going to be a way to do that. But here's what my advice is to you, Cindy, and that is draft the story out that you want to tell and how you want to tell it and what outcomes you want from it. And then use that playbook as a way to help not only tell the story, but most importantly, to ask the kind of questions that you need to have answered in order to determine if this person is really serious, what their timelines are, what else is happening in their lives that will affect the decision, all the things. And again, you know your business way better than I do, so I'm shooting from the hip a little bit. But if you can outline for yourself, if I can picture the perfect phone call or in-person meeting, however you do it, what does that look like? Start to put that down on in a Word document, in a Google Doc, write it out so that you have a good idea about what that conversation actually contains, especially in terms of the questions that you need to ask and the objections you need to be prepared for. So it's a small group here, so I can ask for, anybody who wants to go unmute and answer the question. What's the one universal objection you are guaranteed to get?
We don't need any help. We have it handled. The other one is, because I focus on IT and other things, you don't have experience in my industry.
So those are two really good ones, James, especially that first one is, we got this. Don't need it, right? But there's another one I'm thinking of. Cindy, what do you think?
Honestly, I don't usually get objections. I just get, we're working on it. We're thinking about it. We got to get the family together for pictures. We've got to do this. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's just,
So what you're describing there, Cindy, is what their decision-making process is. And when you think about how your prospects tend to make decisions, all I can advise you is to think about how you want that conversation to go and the questions that you would like to ask, to see if there's a way to uncover what it is that slows it down for them, so that if it's something that you can address or even offer suggestions around, our job when it comes to prospecting, it isn't just to try and qualify them towards a product market fit. Basically, do we have what they need, essentially, right? We assume that before we even start prospecting, right, that we're going to be talking to somebody who fits a profile, who looks like a customer that we would want to have, or even better, looks like customers that we've already done business with. There ought to be a match between what they need, what they want, and whether or not they're actively engaged in trying to understand a better way to do things. In your case, Cindy, you've got people who already sound like they're very interested, or at least interested enough to keep the conversation going, but they've got too many things going that get in their way. You can think of those as kind of objections that you might think about how to remove for them. If part of their issue is getting family photos taken, offer to take the pictures or team up with a photographer and be ready to say, you know what, James, I understand that you and the family need to get together and get that picture taken. I can help you to do that.
That's a great idea.
Okay.
The big objection I was actually fishing for was price. In the B2B world, you almost never get anybody who's willing to accept whatever it is you're proposing as a price point.
They
we've
all
been
want to negotiate.
Yeah, exactly. I was just going to say, we have been trained extremely well as Americans, especially, to negotiate price. We think everything's negotiable. Whether or not you negotiate price is your decision to make. But I'm going to talk a little bit about how, if you're saying true to value, that eliminates, in many ways, what I'll call the classic price negotiation. Anyway, playbooks. They are important because they create the framework and even the methodology of process. And if you are doing this by yourself, or even if you plan to have salespeople in the future, when you don't have a sales playbook to follow, you are winging it. Now, you can be really good at winging it, especially if you're the founder, the owner of the business, and you know what you know everything you need to know, or you know everything there can be to know about your business. And so you feel like you don't need a playbook. And maybe you don't. But my advice is, it doesn't hurt to stop to think about, what would the perfect qualifying call look like? And how would that look going forward in terms of determining whether or not this prospect is the right one to speak with, that it's worth my time to speak with them because your time is valuable? And how can I ensure that the resources that I need, what I call the sales assets, are available to me and to future sales reps that help to answer the questions, that help to establish credibility with use cases, that help to create a connection out to the list of partners that I rely on when it comes time to, I need a photographer to get this family photo taken so that I can get a picture and start painting, things like that. Listening is important, of course. Some of this stuff sounds like common sense, and that's okay. It is. A lot of it is. My advice is, minimize the distractions. Turn the second screen off. Make sure that if you're working from a home office, the door is closed. No offense to pet owners, but they're a distraction if they're in the room with you while you're prospecting. So you want to also be paying close attention to what people say. And you want to make sure, as you're listening to them, you're recapping along the way. And let me make sure I heard that correctly, Deborah. You said, and I repeat back what she said. And that it takes a pivotal role in the summary confirmation. You're asking questions, right? You're using the playbook to ask qualifying questions. You're listening to the responses. You're taking those notes. You're confirming along the way that you understand what they're answering, or how they're answering those questions. And when you get to the end, you are basically connecting the dots. At that point, if you have asked good, meaningful questions, and they've given you answers that reveal to you how good a prospect they are for you and your business, then when you're starting to wrap up this call and moving to agreement on what the next step is going to be, at that point, then again, what you're doing is you're confirming what you heard is what they said, and you're asking them. So, Deborah, given everything we talked about here this morning, what do you think we should do next?
I think I might need to go to my manager and ask them to join us for the next call.
This was not scripted, by the way, but you get the point. Honestly, this is how my career has gone when it's come to doing business with some very large companies, a large soft drink manufacturer, a very large entertainment and amusement park company. This is how it got done. I wasn't talking to the chairman of the board or CEO at first. but I was talking to somebody who I was qualifying as a sponsor that had enough influence and recognition of the problems to be solved to take me to power. And that's what B2B selling often ends up being. Now,
I think, Greg, I want to reinforce this because this is a lesson I see my small business owners have to face. There are a lot of people in an organization who can say no, but there's usually only one or a small group who can say yes. And what you need to do is get through all the people on the way up, because the energy that you spend convincing somebody who can't say yes, all you really need to do is get them to pass you along, or to as you said, to be your evangelist or your influencer, to get the conversation to move forward. Because until someone can say yes, it's all just buildup, right?
yes. Thank you, Deborah. That does really reinforce the point that even now today in 2024, when businesses are often making very collaboratively decisions, that it's not just always some one person at the top. What often happens, and I've got a whole other class on how to do this. If you start prospecting at the top of the organization, as high up as it makes sense, and you can establish value with those individuals, you will get delegated back down. Now, Cindy, this doesn't maybe apply to you so much, but to those who might be listening to the recording later too. When you come in at the top of the organization, as high up again as it makes sense, chairman of the board, depending on who you are and what you're talking about, right? CEO, maybe all same question, but a C-level executive or president or general manager of an organization that has, just by virtue of their title and their responsibilities, a lot of decision-making authority, is the person that I would really strongly encourage you to connect with first. Because if you can establish value in their minds, they will delegate you to the people who will do the exploration, the discovery, the evaluation, but you will always have that connection back to the top of the organization. And that is important for, as the process moves forward, as you continue to establish value, as you continue to map the discovery process back to value that was agreed on, then by the time you get to the end, it's confirming now at this point, is the decision forthcoming? And what decision is it? Yes or no? So building rapport and trust, a couple of pointers about how to do that. How are we doing on time?
We're doing fine.
We're good? Okay. So some ideas around how to build trust. Actually, the first one in terms of active engagement is a bit of what I was just talking about. I'm a big fan of making sure you do some homework first. Nothing turns me off faster than, even for me in my business, I get a voicemail or an email saying that if you're not the right person, could you connect me to the person who is? You have done zero homework and you're telling me that. When it comes to forging those strategic relationships, and again, at some point you hope for the relationship to be built around some common interests as well, and we'll get to that in a second. But you got to make sure you're establishing the fact that you know something about their business and that you've given some thought about how that fit between what you anticipate their needs and wants to be and what you have to offer. You prove that you've done the homework. You're always transparent and honest. Again, this is like things we learned in kindergarten, right? Tell the truth, be honest, right? If they're asking you to do something that you think you can do, but you're not sure you can, tell them that. Don't say, yeah, sure, we can do that, and then hope you can figure it out later. Because what happens if you can't? You don't get a second bite at the apple. In my experience, you just don't. So whenever I'm talking with a prospect throughout my sales career, and even still to this day, if somebody's asking me for help with their SEO and social media marketing, not me. I know people that can help you, but that's not me. Can I do it? Yeah, sure. I do a lot of it on my own, but that's not what I do. James, you had a question?
I almost want them to ask questions that I can't do, because by admitting that you can't do it, establishes more trust and gives you more credibility.
Exactly. That's exactly right. That's exactly right. I'm also a big fan of follow through. Again, we talked about this earlier as we were discovering ways to make connections and how to do good discovery is to keep following through on what was said, what was agreed to, and to put that into some kind of a document. A lot of times a sales rep will kind of shortcut this process because they feel like the activity numbers are more important than being strategic. And so they'll have templates built that say, thank you very much for your time today. I'm really looking forward to meeting you again on, and they fill in the blank, and that's it. They send that email. It's like, I got to say, 5 minutes after that sales rep had that conversation with that prospect, unless it really blew their socks off, they're on to something else. They're thinking about something else. And even if they put that appointment in their calendar and agreed to talk to you, at some point, if you're not recapping the things you discussed and the things you agreed on and the action items and things still to be determined in that follow-on, you're leaving yourself vulnerable. And then finally, common interests. Great way to establish rapport and at some point trust. But here's where I differ from a lot of sales training that's out there. A lot of it will say, when you arrive in an office or even on a Zoom call and you're looking at somebody's background, you're looking for something to draw attention to. You're looking for something to comment on. You're looking for something where you might have a common interest. Cindy, this might be a little less applicable to you because it sounds like you're dealing more in the kind of the consumer side of things. And so this might be a little less of a rigid rule for you. But my rule for sales reps who have worked for me is, if I find out you talked about that sailboat picture the first time you walked into that office, you're going to have an issue with me because you haven't earned the right to talk about that sailboat yet. You need to be talking about business.
Yeah.
And when that individual.
Hallelujah. You are so exactly right. I wanted to say this. I loved when you and James came back on and at the beginning and said, Pittsburgh, let's find the connection. That was genuine to me. What I can't stand is when the person starts with, oh, I understand that you have a daughter who's getting married. Do you want to talk about that? It's like, shut up. You don't know me. You can't talk about that stuff. I think Cindy's is quite different in that she might want to talk about pets. Cat person, dog person. Tell me about your cat.
Yes.
People who are calling about a pet portrait, they don't mind talking about that. But other than, you can talk to James about the Pirates record this season because you guys know you have Pittsburgh in common. I think people get way too personal, way too quick.
Yeah, and that's a really good point, Deborah. Thank you. This is situational. If you're at a networking event, it's okay to recognize that somebody's wearing a Penn State hat and you went to Penn State. I mean, that's a different environment than you've gotten someone at a prospect to agree to meet with you. You've done your homework to find out about the organization and that individual, and they went to Penn State and you did too. Keep it in your pocket until there's a meaningful conversation going. Because what's not going to make a difference? Whether you start off saying, hey, I see we both went to Penn State. We are. Like, that's, to me, you're telling me as the prospect that you're wasting my time kind of at the beginning. Now, again, situationally, if you're at a networking event, those are icebreakers. Right. That is how you break the ice. I make this point only because there are a lot of sales coaching systems out there that tell you need to try and establish rapport on a personal level right from the very beginning. And I tend to follow call it the teachings of a guy by the name of Jeffrey Moore and a book he wrote called How to Be a Rainmaker. Save the sailboat conversation for your way out the door, assuming the conversation went well and there's going to be a next step, right? The Zoom call is getting ready to end. You're on the call with a prospect and you say, look, you know what? Before we end, James, I got to ask, that sailboat behind you, can you share that story with me? Assuming that James and I have had a good conversation We've agreed that there's going to be next steps. We've started to get the details that I want to put into a sales project plan that says, here's what's going to happen, the next 3 things, when they're going to happen, who's going to be involved. We've got agreement on all that. And now James is open to the idea of telling me the sailboat story. Questions, thoughts, anything else?
Sometimes I think those Penn State people are fanatics. So if you lead with that, it's like Freemasons. I got to give you the business.
So you might be speaking a degree of truth there, James. Funny enough, I am a Penn State grad, but I am not one of those people that bleeds blue and white. If somebody starts a conversation, if a prospect, and this has happened to me, not very many times, but it has, somebody starts off a conversation with me, hey, I see we both went to Penn State. We are. I'm like, you're talking around.
I didn't have a good experience at Penn State. Sorry. Oh, then I didn't go either.
Yeah. Well, again, so one last thing on this, an excellent point, is it's really dangerous if you're doing it disingenuously. Really dangerous. Because if you start off talking about something that appears to be a personal common interest, but you don't really know anything about it, look out. You could get the flamethrower treatment, especially from a Penn State grad. So how do we overcome objections? Number 1, anticipate them. Write them out. Be ready for them.
Cindy,
you
want to say something about cat or dogs?
Yeah, what I was going to say is you had a part where you said you were going to address price, but then because that didn't come up, you kind of skipped it. Would you be willing to do that?
Yeah, sure. In fact, I'm going to get to that.
Oh, okay, great. Thank you. Sorry.
Yeah, no problem. No problem at all. Again, so in terms of objections, they're going to come. I'd be even a little worried if you didn't get them. In my experience, at least in the B2B space, when I've had conversations with prospects and didn't get questions, didn't get objections, it usually didn't go anywhere because they're not really giving it much thought. It's rare for you to be hitting the bullseye with everything that you're asking and everything that you're sharing. Again, we're going to be actively listening. A really simple thing to do is when you're doing your discovery and you're asking the qualifying questions, you're trying to understand what the prospect's situation really is and what the problems are, the implications for not doing something about it. For those of you who've gone through sales training before, you'll recognize that as spin selling, but basically it's what you're trying to do. You keep asking questions. So what else? Is there anything more? What else? What about this? Until somebody says, no, I think that's everything. Then you've gotten to the root of what their thoughts are and uncovered objections potentially that they are unwilling to share. A couple of other things about objections that I really think are important is don't grade them all with the same degree of severity. Have your prospect do that. If you get a list of objections, you get a list of things that they want, and you're not sure about how to do that or how to provide for that, you got to ask questions like, where is it on your list? How important is it to you? What if we could solve most of that for you? Because prospects are going to want the moon and the stars. They're going to want everything. And part of our job as sales, yeah, right, James?
For free.
And for free. and for free. Yeah. Part of our job is the analogy I use is we're doctors. Yeah, we're asking the patient, where does it hurt? But we're doing more than that. We're also examining the patient. We're finding out, does this hurt more or less? What about this? How about over here? And some of the things that we can do, we can resolve, hopefully, the greatest pains they're having, but the greatest pains that are of most importance. And those aren't always two things that are the same, right? If you don't ask, you won't know. And so, Cindy, for you, I think, it sounds like, a big stumbling block, a big objection for what's happening in your world is that people just aren't prioritizing the things that you need them to do first to get finally to a decision to have a painting done of their pets. And this is why you know your business, you know your customers. I encourage you to sit down and think about, so what are all the possible objections that people could have? Now, that list sounds like it could get really big because every family is a little bit different. If the decision making is coming from the family unit, there's a million things that could be in their way. Try and think through what some of them might be. Ask the questions what they are. Find out why it's been a year and a half. Do you mind if I ask, what are some of the things that are keeping you from getting that family photo taken with Fluffy? Just ask them. Find out.
You know, it appears to me with Cynthia's business, it's an emotional tug. Is there any way for her to exploit the emotions of this to help get the close?
So I'm going to use a little different word than exploit.
Thank
That's
you.
fair. It's throwing a thesaurus, I understand.
Now, look, hey, James, I'm a conscientious capitalist, but I'm still a capitalist, so I get you. Okay. Leverage would be the word I might use there. The answer is yes, but I don't know what the questions are that leads to that leverage. Cindy knows it better than us, but that's what Cindy, if you were thinking about and working on and trying, you'll learn whether or not the questions that you're asking are the ones that get people to make a decision. One of the simplest ones, again, is what's holding you back?
Yeah.
And I bet you most people you talk to will have a list of things.
It's
You'll have a
probably
list of things.
great aunt Denise won't schedule the family photo, but I want to go back to Cindy's price question because I think this is the right time to talk about this. There's one school of thought that says in a sales conversation, if possible, you shouldn't say the price because you don't want the price to be the thing that stops the conversation from moving forward. Like, let's see if this is the right fit before we get into the price. And then there's you might as well get rid of the tire kickers by telling them this is going to cost $1,000. And if you're not up for that, then you probably shouldn't have this conversation with me. I actually have a coaching client who was looking at their competitor and in the competitor's sales materials, it says, our sales packages start at $10,000. So they've established, we're not talking to you unless you have that. And they're like, wow, we're afraid to do that because we think then no one will talk to us. So I think there's we need to talk about how do you handle price in these conversations.
Thank you so much. Yes. Thank you.
Yes. Okay. Let's do that. So my answer to that, Deborah, is that is totally on the business to decide because there isn't a right or wrong answer to that. There really isn't. It becomes a matter of, do I want to use price? And can I establish value in a context that doesn't include me in the conversation? If I can do that, then I'm okay with a price being public that establishes if this is out of your range, then it's better that we don't spend time talking. Then that's okay. And in a consumer facing world, I think that's okay almost all the time. And Cindy, maybe that's the advice that I would offer is if you're not sharing what your package, I don't know if you have like different packages, you do different things for different kinds of customers. You could start, if you're not already, you can start to just simply promote that as a way of qualifying prospects. And maybe those shoppers who take 3 years are no longer the people you're chasing around. When I think about prospects and I think about how much time and energy goes into prospects, the story I use is the doggy in the yard, and maybe this will actually resonate pretty well with you, Cindy. If there's a little doggy in your backyard and you are out there with the dog and you are trying to catch this dog and it's running around and it's having a great time, you're chasing it. The dog's loving it. Maybe you not so much. You can tell who is who in this little scenario, right? Your prospect is that little doggy. If you decide at some point I'm done chasing you, I'm going back in the house. If that dog is yours,
It runs to the door and wants to be let in.
It'll follow you to the house. If that dog isn't yours, he's going to the next yard looking for somebody else to play with. And so when it comes to whether or not price is going to be the issue, then if you publicize price and you use it as a qualifier, and again, the thing I still worry about is make sure there's context. If you're gonna, and again, I'm just gonna pull numbers out of the air. If a painting, a family portrait with the family pet is $5,000, then I probably want to see examples of the work. I want to know who else has bought it. I'm looking for customer testimonials, because if I have $5,000 to spend on something like this, I want to make sure that there's evidence of the quality of the work.
Sure.
Right? No offense, but that's what I'm
Right.
looking for.
No, of
Right?
course.
As a consultant, I'm not publishing my price. And I'll tell you why. Everybody will know this from the recording. Because you're not buying my time, you're buying my expertise and my experience. And until I understand what it is that you need and what I can do for you, I can't give you a price, because I'm not an Uber driver and I'm not an hourly worker. So I don't publish a price. If I had package deals, probably would, right? I'm a shareholder in a calendar management company called Confirmed. There are packages. You can buy I honestly don't remember what the packages are called, but you can buy the bronze, the silver, or the gold, and there's a price. But I understand how to make that decision based on the fact that we're talking about basically a solution to a problem that I'm already pretty familiar with, and that most people are. They already know. They already know how to.
In Cindy's case, because she's doing individual work based on their pet or their family, whatever their picture, and she only has so much time. I mean, it seems to me that creating this idea of exclusivity, like I can only do 4 more before Christmas, and I'm booking them right now. And if you're not in for this year's Christmas,
Yep.
you'll go on my waiting list for afterwards. That creating some exclusivity around it might get scarcity. Well, you don't want to call it scarcity in the same way you don't want to use the word exploit, but this is a privilege. If you want to be on my list to get done by Christmas, you need to let me know by September 15th.
Deborah, that's an excellent point, and something that works in the B2B world as well. I call it a credible sense of urgency. And it goes back to this idea of a sales project plan that starts with so Deborah, you said you really want to implement some kind of a solution by first quarter of next year. Let's use that as the stake in the ground and start working backwards from there. We're going to have other projects that are going to be on our radar. You're going to have other things you need to do. We need to make sure this is a priority. And so we need to talk about and map out, how does this decision get made? Who's going to be involved? And when are the next meetings going to get held? You can do something very similar in the consumer world. And you could do something very similar like that, I think, Cindy, with your prospects. Is so how do you get a new prospect, Cindy? Where's your next customer coming from?
Most of them are word of mouth. Yeah, and honestly, when you said about chasing them and doing all that, in those couple of years, I don't do a whole lot. They reach out, we talk about getting photos. They may even send me some photos, but then they don't decide on something, or I may go take photos. And it's like I just keep hanging in there, and every once in a while our paths cross, and they'll say, oh yeah, I've been meaning to do that, that's on the list. So
yes. Yeah.
And
so without getting too deep into the specifics of your business, I think this next slide might actually be helpful in not just in a B2B sense, but even in what you're doing. Because when it comes to getting together with people after that qualifying has occurred, in your case, after somebody has done a referral, you've had an initial conversation. I'm going to continue to stress that what I think should still be happening, regardless of the kind of business that you're in, is that there should be some kind of a recap about what was talked about and some kind of an agreement on what's going to happen next and who's going to be involved. And let's get it on a calendar so that we both know what's happening next and with whom.
okay.
And if that has to change, again, I always leave it open to the individual. Look, because when you get pushback, well, I don't know, I'm not sure I can commit to this date or not. It's telling you something, number one, that either they're not that great a prospect, or you haven't done a good enough job yet of establishing value that they will get from working with you. And that's okay. That can come later. Depends on how complicated the decision is for someone. But most importantly is once you get an agreement on what's going to happen next, and we start talking about what do these meetings and presentations actually look like? How should they go? To me, they should be tailored. You know, there's a common set of capabilities, features, functions, offerings that all of us have in our business. But at some point, somebody wants to know, you know, what to do for them. This is not the asynchronous independent transaction. This is not the shopping cart where I just download stuff and I don't need to talk to anybody. Okay. So when there's the need to be involved in your prospect's decision-making process, make sure you're talking to somebody who's got the authority to make the decision. Present to power. If you start as a B2B, if you start at the top, you establish value with that individual, they have delegated and relegated you to somebody else lower down to do the whole discovery. I think you always want to try and ask, even press, to make sure the person who's at the top of this project, a decision maker, is involved in any kind of follow-up meeting. It never hurts to ask. Make sure, and the little acronym here, WIFM, is the customer's favorite radio station. This is an old acronym, man. This has been around longer than me. Does anyone know what WIFM
What's
means?
in it for me?
Exactly. Not FBAs. What are FBAs?
Feature benefits
and advantages. Nobody wants a list of features, benefits, and advantages. They get it. This is the same story you tell to every prospect. What they care about is what's in it for them. And again, if you go back to doing good discovery using playbooks that ensure that you're asking the questions you need to have answered, you've got the responses to the objections that you know are coming. You've got a way of, call it, defending your price. Then you've gotten this far. You're now talking with that prospect about what the value is to them, what's in it for them. You need to tell a compelling story too. Like we said before, people remember stories. You guys will remember the doggy in the yard long after you remember what was on these slides.
Yeah.
Right? But you got to be telling those stories in ways that connect them specifically. This is where you're demonstrating you have paid close attention. All that recapping that you've done, this is where it really starts to pay dividends. Because now, literally, in any kind of a presentation, whether it's Zoom, in person, what have you, I am coaching people to say, Deborah, in our last meeting, you said, and I don't emphasize it like that, but I use the words, in our last meeting,
You told
said,
me this, right?
Yeah, and I don't, and if you decide to, like, go off on a different tangent, I'm not saying, well, wait a minute, you said what I'm doing at that point. I say, oh, okay, so I'm hearing something that's a little bit different. I want to make sure I understand it. I'm replaying it back to you. I'm recapping it back to you, right? That's what really consultative selling really is all about, is I'm trying to help you. And if I'm doing a good job, I'm listening to what you're saying. I'm trying to see if there's a fit that can be had. I want to understand what you value the most, not what I do, but what you value the most, and how I can help you to either solve that problem or achieve that goal. This is not a good example of this, but visuals are great. This presentation doesn't have a ton of them in it, except as background. But anytime that you've got visuals, and Cindy, you're perfect for this, right? The idea that there's evidence and demonstration to show someone about what you have done before, that whether if it's a piece of technology, how it works, if it's software, how it operates and what it looks like on the screen. Your business has some kind of a visual potentially attached to it. If it does, use it. And finally, again, you've heard me say this a couple of times at least by now, you focus on value. And if you've started the whole prospecting around what it is that's most valuable to your prospect, then what we're doing along the way is simply confirming that we understand what it is they want, what they need, who's involved in making the decision, when it'll get made, and what's the outcome? What's the value they get out of this? This could be a little harder for you, Cindy, in terms of putting a dollar and cent sign on it. James, you can put dollar and cent signs on this all day until the cows come home. There's no question that if I'm trying to help somebody as a sales consultant, I can talk about measurable outcomes that I've helped my clients to realize and how that happened. I can project that ROI to a future client legitimately based on history and suggest that your results may not be exactly the same. In fact, they probably won't be, but results nonetheless that we can start to project and put a dollar sign on what that means.
Would it be fair to lead them to where the ROI could be, because you don't know their costs? You know, how much does it cost not to fill this position? They need to figure that stuff out. I wouldn't have that information. Is it okay to point out things like that?
Actually, yes. The answer is yes, but here's what I would say to that, James. What I suggest you do is you take a swag at what that number could be. You can legitimately guess how much a new employee means to them, what a good job of recruiting and placement means in terms of turnover, whatever your key metrics are. You can put a dollar sign on that. And, you know, I worked for a sales manager a long time ago, and he, again, this is another story that you guys will probably remember. I had the same kind of question, James. I'm like, how am I supposed to know what kind of measurable dollarized outcome we can create for these people? I don't know what their books are. They're not a publicly traded company. I have no idea. He said, Greg, your job is to pick a fight. And I said, what? He said, project a number, and when you project that number with your prospect, what you want them to say is, where the hell did you get that number? Because now I know they're interested. I have at least gotten my foot in the door far enough to say, you know, James, thanks for asking. Because what I'm doing is I'm projecting based on what I think is at least somewhat close to where you might be, based on companies just like yours that we've done business with before. And if I have the legitimate ability to do so, I'm name dropping. So the answer to your question is, you don't know what their numbers are. But as long as you can pick a number where they don't think you're out of your mind, then hopefully what you've done, if you've led up to the point where you are acknowledging that here's who we've done things like, here's who we've done business with before. There we go. My finger in the screen. Here's what we've done before. Here's who we've done it with. Here are the results that they have achieved. Those three things. Then the question in the prospect's mind, you hope happens, is that, yeah, you know what? They're one of our competitors. They're kind of like us. They're about the same size. And James is saying that he can have a bottom line impact of $500,000 a year through his staffing services. I should at least be giving James 20 minutes to, in fact, determine what our number might look like. And if he doesn't say that, or she doesn't say that out loud, James, you propose that. Part of what we want to do, Greg, is determine where this number lands with you. And I'm assuming that's because it's going to be part of the consideration for how important this is on your list of things to do. Remember back when we talked about where does this land on your list of priorities? And how about if we get 85% of the way there, is that going to be good enough? Again, a little harder kind of way to think about this for you, Cindy, and for any consumer-facing kinds of services. But, you know, there's probably some of that you can borrow and put into your playbook. You just got to sit down and think through it. How does this conversation go? What do they do?
We're 7 minutes overtime, so let's finish the slides.
Oh, my goodness. Oh,
I know. We're having so much fun.
Sorry about that. So getting to the decision. Here we are. A couple of very key things to always be striving for, always execute on, and that is ensure that you've summarized everything that you have talked about in terms of the value that you have to offer and what that ROI looks like. ask if there are remaining concerns. You've got to make sure that you're asking everyone in the room, everyone on the Zoom, everyone who's part of this, are there any other questions or concerns that you have? Make sure and ask, because you don't want that hidden objection to be the reason you don't get the business when you could have addressed it. And then just ask for the decision. Right? This is the part where, again, in my experience, if we have followed the project plan all the way, we have identified and documented who's involved, when are we going to do this, what are the criteria, then what we're getting to in the final stages of this exploration and joint discovery is now confirmation that we've checked the boxes you said were meaningful, Deborah. All the things you said you wanted, all the things you said would be important to this. Everyone else on the team looks like they're in agreement as well, unless you tell me differently. All we need to get started with now is a bit of paperwork. Shall I send it to you today for signature? I'm asking the question straight up because at this point, what's left? There's nothing left to talk about. So another old school, but still I think useful bit of advice is don't talk past the close. If you've done everything that is outlined in this presentation and you've got it all documented, ask. So now you have to work on the worksheet by yourselves, I guess, because we're over time. This deck will get sent to you, right? I'm going to send this deck to Deborah. Deborah's going to send it to you. There are some active links in this deck, one of which is on this last screen. The free sales resources up here will take you to my web page where you can get to all of the other resources that I make available to folks like yourselves. This starts with what I call preparing for success. This is really, how do you know who you should be talking to, what you should be saying, and why they should care? Some tools and templates for prospecting. When should I prospect? What should the message be? And, what does a call script actually look like if I write it out? This is just one example from a client that I had. And then reaching the decision. Again, documenting how you, and more importantly, your prospect will make that decision. One last thing I'm going to provide to Deborah to share with you is a link to a startup sales training course that I launched on Tuesday. So module 1 is already completed, but module 2 and 3 will be the next 2 Tuesdays. I invite you to join. All you'll need to do is drop me an email and let me know. I won't charge you the $1 that I'm charging the other students. Right. Because I know how important every dollar is to a small company. But I didn't want to do it for free because too many times I do this too. You sign up for free stuff and then, some other thing will take over your calendar.
All right, you can stop sharing.
I'm happy to stay around as long as anybody wants to answer questions.
This was great. Let me stop the recording.